Alright, so it's been a little while since I've flown the Pmdg MD-11, so I'll do the best I can from memory here. Here we have KLM Flight 606 from San Francisco to Amsterdam Schiphol, a non-stop flight of about 5,000 nautical miles, so it really stretches the legs here of the MD-11, but it's more than capable. And the MD-11 is a pretty great aircraft, designed in the mid-1980s to replace the DC-10. It got a full upgrade. Not only is it a stretched variant of the DC-10, but it got new engines, composite materials, and of course a glass cockpit. And it was pretty ahead of its time. It's not quite as forward-thinking as, say, the L-1011, but it did sell more aircraft because it didn't suffer from the problems that the L-1011 did. So coming here into the cockpit, the MD-11 is best described as a hybrid almost between what you'd see in an Airbus and what you'd see in a Boeing aircraft. It has a lot of the automation of an Airbus, but a lot of the complexity of a Boeing, so it's not really quite as straightforward as either of them. If you go to the overhead panel right here, it actually has some pretty cool flows, and when you toggle any of these switches, it really shows you what's going on, whereas in a Boeing it doesn't show you anything. So right now I've got, you can see up here, the APU is running. And when you shut down the engines, the APU automatically delivers power to the rest of the aircraft, as well as bleed air for the packs, which is kind of like an Airbus feature. Boeing, you have to manually transfer that over in something like a 737. The newer aircraft, they are beginning to automate it. And we've got all our fuel tank readouts up here as well. So you have a lot of functionality on the overhead panel, and I'll turn off my logo at this point. I can turn off my beacon since the engines are not running. So a lot going on up here. Taking a look at everything else, the autopilot is probably the simplest part of the entire aircraft here on the MCP, the mode control panel. Really what happens is you dial in your target altitude based on, whatever your flight is calling for that day. And then once it's programmed in, you just have to hit the nav button in auto flight, and it takes care of absolutely everything else. This is even easier than a Boeing with a VNAV, LNAV layout. This is really just a couple of switches, and that's about it. It's pretty impressive, and then toggling something like the FMS speed here will allow the computer to take over all of those controls as well. Where the MD-11 gets a little finicky is the setup of its flight management system. So let's go take a look at the FMS right now. Alright, now this is the shortcut, so this is provided by Pmdg to open doors and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So we'll click on FMC up here, and we'll go to the flight plan initialization page. Now I've pre-programmed the flight using Flight Sim Commander, so I should be able to just type it in. So I type in KSFO to Amsterdam, and I put it in right up here. And there we go, and there are all my waypoints, and then I just click insert. And that's it. Now I can put in my cruise levels, and we're going to shoot for, we got to go east, so there's going to be an odd level flight altitude, so flight level 310, and my cost index will be the standard 80. I'm not going to put in an alternate, but we've got to close my door because I guess catering's all done here. Shortcuts, cabin doors, close. This is an add-on payware for San Francisco. It's good. The graphics are nice. Annoyances include the Jetways don't connect, but whatever. It's also request recording. Yep. Let's head back inside here. Okay. Back to the FMC. So we can we can type in the flight number if we want, or alternate route and alternate. I'm not going to do any of that. Another thing is you scroll through the pages using like this kind of right toggle for page. And what we have to do now is the computer automatically knows how much fuel is on board. So what we have to transfer, all we have to do is transfer that into the block fuel here by clicking on the line key here, and then it gives us everything else. It fills in all the other parameters. And that's really it too. On our takeoff page, now here's a weird feature of McDonnell Douglas and Douglas before that. You actually can set your flaps with what's called dial-a-flap. Now that's down here. So whereas on a Boeing you've got 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, so on and so forth. Here you've got slats, and then you've got your ladder flaps, 28, 35, 50. Anything in between, you can set your yourself using this dial flap. So takeoff is generally flaps 22, and approach is flaps 15. So we dial in 22 on here, and then we dial in 22 here. And we have to put in our slope is 0, 0. Our outside air temperature is 16. There we go. Now we also need to put in our departure. And now here's another little funny thing. So we go to flight plan, and here's San Francisco. We click on that, and now we have to click on SID in order to get our departure runways. And I don't even know what it is, so let's listen to these.
Morning.
Welcome aboard. Hello.
Oh good, it's IFR. Not that I'm on an IFR flight plan here, but oh well.
Hello.
Alright, 28 left, and 28 right. Not a surprise. Okay, let's get rid of the ATIS.
Morning.
So departure will be 28 left. Okay. And let me see if there's a SID we'll be using.
Morning. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
The answer is no. We're going to head right to our first waypoint.
Welcome aboard.
Okay. Now there's a flight plan discontinuity here, so all you have to do is clear it out. Yep. Check to make sure everything else looks good, which it does. I don't know what our arrival runway is going to be yet in Amsterdam. As we get closer, we'll plug that in. Now we can confirm our takeoff speeds again. And you're going to see that they're pretty high. I mean, even 747s don't usually have a rotation speed of 172 knots. And that's just, the MD-11 has a slightly smaller wing. It just doesn't generate quite as much lift. And here's another thing, stabilizer 6.1. This is your trim on a Boeing aircraft. But it's so important on the MD-11 because of where the tail engine is mounted. This creates a lot of aft center of gravity. So if your trim is not properly set, you're either going to tail strike or you're never going to get off the ground. And so that is like one of the most important features to pay attention to. So again, my stabilizer needs to be at 6.1. My engines aren't running, so I got to turn on my auxiliary hydraulic pump. And now I just watch right up here. This will be my trim, okay? And I just wait until we get to 6.1. And it will turn green as well to indicate that we're in the proper CG range for takeoff.
Hello. Morning. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
There's that.
Hello.
Turn off our pump there. You can set our auto brake now to take off. Another thing you have to do, you have to arm the spoilers for takeoff and landing. The way we do that is by toggling the speed brake lever. There we go. That's all set.
Welcome aboard.
Let's also check all our other parameters. Performance. Let's see. My optimum flight level is 310, so that's exactly what I picked. That's wonderful.
Hello.
Okay, just limits. Set for takeoff. That's going to be a pretty high takeoff thrust, but you know, that's what's going to happen. Now let's check our progress page, make sure that we will land with enough fuel. We will land with an estimated 30,000 pounds, which is above our minimums, which is good. Let's make sure we're dialed in at 31,000 up here. We are.
Hello.
Check a few other things all the way down here. Let's make sure the transponder is on. Yep. And we'll test it.
Welcome aboard. Hello.
There we go. And in order to actually display the traffic on here, we have to hit the TRFC button up here. There we go. And now we're going to get that display. And that's it for pretty much setting up the cockpit of the MD-11. It's not terrible once you get used to it. It's actually pretty simple. There'll be a few other little quirks you have to watch out for while you're taxiing out, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Check our overhead panel here for any discrepancies, and we're looking good right now. This side. Alright, they're still loading the cargo onto the plane, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit, and I'll be back once they're all finished. Alright, we're back. They're finally finished loading all the pallets into the aircraft, so we're going to get ready for pushback and departure. Obviously, there's some static equipment that the scenery provides, and GSX is just going to run right through that. Just like that. No biggie. Even though this is one of Pmdg's older aircraft, I still think the fidelity of the cockpit and the detail is impressive.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback. Locking gear. Departure check completed. Flight commencing push. All engines clear. Start that wheel.
Okay, so let's take a look at the MD-11 start procedure. Like any other aircraft, anti-collision lights go on first. Okay, and then here's how this system works. There's an engine ignition panel up here, and as soon as you click it, the bleeds will turn off to the packs, and so you'll hear a noticeable decrease in the sound of air rushing into the cockpit. So let's do that, and you can watch up here as in the pneumatic section of the overhead as all the valves switch. There we go. And then all we have to do is pull out the ignition switch to start. Starting engine 1. And you can see the N2 spooling up. We hit the fuel run control here at around 16%. There we go. Starting engine number 3. The reason we start up 1 and then 3 is for longer taxi times, you can actually just taxi on the 2 engines and leave engine 2 off until about 2 minutes before takeoff. However, we are going to end up starting engine 2 as well. We're at a very high takeoff weight today, so we're going to need all that power to get us moving down the taxiway. And again, the way you know that this was an old Douglas aircraft, you know, you've got these DC-3 style window cranks. Love it. Alright, starting engine number 2. And here's your, annunciator panel, so it's telling us that we're not getting any cabin air right now. The packs are off, but obviously that's because it's being diverted to start the engines.
Set parking brakes.
Alright, all engines are started, and the MD-11 is going to auto reconfigure everything, but I can turn off the APU at this time. We do that up here. And you'll watch as it redirects the pneumatic flow of air. and it'll also switch over all of our electrical power as necessary.
Unlocking gear. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass being removed.
Alright, we can also set our slats and flaps. There we go. Now time for the long taxi out to runway 28 left. So again,
Left is clear.
once
Right
we're all
is clear.
set up and to go at the runway, I'll be back. Alright, we're just holding short here of 28 left and we're ready to go. Now, one of the things you do before takeoff here is prepare the autopilot. You hit nav, and then auto flight, and you'll be able to hear the throttle mechanism engage. And that's it. Alright, so let's start rolling out onto the runway. Now, one of the reasons you don't set that up prior to takeoff is that if you advance the throttle too far, the autopilot will think you're taking off and it will automatically engage the toga switch. So let's turn on our landing lights and our strobes. And that's it. Alright, we're all set. Advance the throttles, and then listen for the throttle clamp.
Thrust set. 80 knots. V1. Rotate. Positive rate. Gear up.
You notice there on my PFD display, holding about 194, 195 knots, and it actually says FR on there next to that pink dot. That's my target speed, but the FR is actually flap retraction. So we're at a speed at which we can pull up our flaps and have only our slats extended. So we're going to pitch down just a bit, and we'll do just that.
Flaps up.
Alright, let's get on an intercept course. This is genuine IFR conditions here, so we are flying via instrument only. We are coming up on slat retraction speed. You can see that in the SR on the PFD along the speed tape. Pitch down just a little bit to achieve that speed, because we are pitching right now for 270 knots. Slat retraction.
Slats retract.
Now you notice as soon as we pull up those slats that yellow warning at the bottom of the speed tape really jumps up. This is a very heavy aircraft with wings that aren't exactly large for its size. So once you pull up your slats, you have to be very, very careful of how fast you're going. It's 1,100 feet above me, 1,000 feet above me. I don't see him. Hopefully right there. This is no 777. It doesn't have any power to spare, so when it is heavy, it does not climb very fast. Alright, let's engage the autopilot and see what happens.
Auto flight.
Auto brake, landing lights. Alright, and we're going to direct climb up to 31,000 feet. I can turn this over to standard barometric pressure right there. And that's about it. MD-11 will take care of everything else right up until we reach the top of descent. And that's when I will come on back. Ooh, those are some fun graphics. There we go. Leaving San Francisco behind. All its wonderful weather. Alright, here we are about 24 nautical miles out from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. Now, again, as I've described in this video and others, one of the biggest flaws to Microsoft Flight Simulator is the air traffic control system. And even with add-ons, it's really only changing the aircraft you see and the liveries they boast, rather than the way they interact with the airports, the airspace, and of course your own aircraft. So right now, if I were to go ahead and follow the request of Schiphol's tower, they'd want me to come in on runway 27 here, which would be with almost a direct tailwind. So instead I'm going to be using runway 6, the ILS to runway 6, which will give me a headwind. That does mean, though, that you might see some traffic going the opposite way or taking off on the runway I'm landing on. Obviously, this is just the way it's going to be. Again, looking here, at the complexity of the MD-11, you can see that it's already preparing for the approach. Okay, when its version of LNAV and VNAV, which is really just the auto flight button, is engaged, it automatically sets everything. But let's drop our slats now.
Slats extended.
And we also need to configure the approach flaps. This is the dial-a-flap mechanism, and the typical flap setting is flaps 15. Check our overhead panel. Landing lights are on. Let's set our spoilers so they deploy upon landing, and our auto brake, which we'll set to medium. And let's also just ensure everything is set for landing. Alright. Okay. VREF is 158. I do not have any third-party scenery for Amsterdam, so it's just the default scenery that comes with Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's arm the approach. And put flaps 15 down. And you can see the FMC automatically reducing our speed.
Localizer's alive.
And the autopilot is now capturing the localizer, which you can see down here. Again, very simple, just the approach land button has to be engaged. Let's also put the gear down.
Glide slope's alive.
Just about as we're intercepting the glide slope, we will put down flaps 28.
Flaps 28.
Alright, and it's continuing to reduce speed to our final approach speed, so we'll go down to flaps 35.
Flaps 35.
I should note the MD-11 does have a flaps 50 setting. This is sort of a carryover from the predecessor to McDonnell Douglas, which was just Douglas. But flaps 50 is rarely used as it requires an enormously high power setting. And that's it, we're all configured for the approach. At about 1,000 above, I'll disengage the autopilot. We've reached the outer marker.
Autopilot.
Alright. Gonna manually fly now. Has been a little while since I've flown the MD-11. It's not the easiest thing to
1,000.
land. There's not a lot of rudder authority in strong crosswinds. And it is very heavy.
Approaching minimum. Minimum.
Continue.
One hundred. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Spoilers deployed. Reverse thrust available.
Oh, there's your FSX traffic right in the way there. Maybe he'll actually get off the runway.
80 knots. 60 knots.
bit. Alright, so we're coming into a remote parking stand down here. I believe it is... I'm not really sure. I think it's gate G73 here at Amsterdam. I have my traffic settings up pretty high, so there were no normal gates left. This will do. The APU should be running by now. Maybe it's not. There we go. Alright, I can see the marshaller right there. Turn off our taxi lights so we don't blind them. I think I started that turn a little early. Large aircraft, not easy to taxi. And you can see this remote stand's a little off in terms of the lines and everything like that, but it is what it is. Requested deboarding. So that's about it. You know, it wasn't like a perfect overview of everything that this MD-11 is capable of, but it's still a really great add-on. It wasn't the best-selling aircraft for Pmdg, and that's why they have been a little hesitant to carry it over or to update it as they are with the 747 version 2, which will hopefully come out sometime this year. But regardless, it's a lot of fun to fly. It provides a lot of different complexity to it that you don't just see in the Boeing and the Airbus, and it's a really, again, enjoyable plane to fly, so certainly recommend it to anybody. That's about it. Have a good one.